Welcome back to the Triumph Show. I'm Melanie Davis, and today we are meeting and talking with someone who inspires me. She is an incredible Triumph story. She has overcome some adversity and challenges that very small percentage of people ever overcome. And for that reason, I find her story to be incredibly important, because she really shows how to deal with something that's overcoming, usually overcomes you. And so this is Susan Washington, and I'm going to let her tell her story.
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm just going to share my story. I was just a typical girl born into a typical middle-class family, living what everyone thought was a typical life. And it turns out everyone was wrong. My family and I endured heartbreaking tragedies and crippling addictions that almost destroyed us, and I alone survived. My story will take you from the July 4th weekend of 1971 through today. And what had happened on that July 4th weekend in 1971 is my brother, who was 18 at the time, committed suicide. We were down at the lake house. We had a lake house, and I just remember a man, this is my first memory, and a man walked out on the pier and bent down and said something to my parents, and my mother collapsed. After David's death, we shut the doors to his room, and we never spoke about him again. And both my parents started turned to alcohol to cope with the pain.
They completely stopped talking about him?
Yes, we knew. It was an unspoken rule in my home that we could not bring up his name.
Wow.
And I don't really have any other memories. My sister was 10 years older, and she was already going to SMU, and so it was just me and my mom and dad at home. And I just knew, when I got in junior high, there was, I just had a fear, a knot in my stomach that something was wrong. And it was then I kind of suspected my mother had an alcohol problem. She wouldn't pick me up, and when I would finally find her ride home, she'd be asleep, and I couldn't wake her up. And I really didn't know what was going on, but I just knew my mother was sleeping more and more, and my dad was staying out later and later. When I got into high school and could drive, my father moved out. He moved to our lake house, and by this point, I knew that my mother had a severe problem. She was passed out every day by this point.
But you were doing well in high school for everybody else.
Right.
You were a cheerleader.
Right. I was popular. I went to school every day. I made good grades. No one knew. I just thought if I could achieve enough, they would change and pay attention to me. But But by high school, and after it was just me and mother at home, when I would come home, she'd be passed out somewhere. And the first thing I would do is check to make sure she was alive. And one time I got home from school, and I opened the door, and she was passed out in the entryway, and there were perfume bottles all around her, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. But when I bent down to check to make sure she was alive, I realized she had drank all that perfume.
Yeah.
And so she would drink anything. When she ran out of vodka, she would drink anything with alcohol in it. And when she would run out of everything completely, she would go through DTs. And I'd have to gather her up and get her into the car, because I knew at a young age that it was dangerous to detox without medical attention.
Right.
And I would have to get her to the hospital. And but again, no one at school knew this. I was popular. By my senior year, I was elected head cheerleader. And I did well in school. When we graduated from high school, I graduated with honors, and I had a huge high school class. It was probably a class of 1,000.
And you went to a very wealthy high school.
Well, I grew up in East Dallas. Yes. It was like probably a little upper middle class neighborhood. I went to Skyline, but it was a big school, and we had like probably 1,000 in our graduating class. And when we were done, after the ceremony, I went out to see, my friends were meeting up with their parents, taking pictures and stuff like that, and I kept walking through the crowd, hoping and praying someone was there, and no one had come. And I was heartbroken. And by this point, I was angry. And when I got home later, I went to some parties, and I went skiing the next day, but Sunday night I got home, and my mother walked into my room, and I just hated her. And I told her to get the blank out of my room, that I just wish she was dead. And I just slammed the door in her face.
And you said that to her, I wish you were dead.
Yes. Yeah. And when I woke up the next morning, I found her body. And I was overcome with guilt and shame. And
As if you had been
yeah.
the cause of her death or something.
And there was a very accusing voice telling me not to ever share that because people would blame me. I was scared to tell my sister. I was scared to tell anyone, so I carried that. I went to Eastville. I went to a school around here. This was a very dark time in my life because I was living in that house alone where my brother committed suicide in one room and my mother had died in the other, and I was 18 years old. But it wasn't long after that I went to live with my sister, and this was a good time in my life. Kathy grew up just in a different home than I did, because she was out of the home when David died. Right, and she. They sat down and ate dinner. I had never done that. I always ate by myself. I didn't really experience family life. And I just knew she loved me unconditionally. And I ended up staying up there and going to college, to West Texas State University back then. It's West Texas A&M now. And I graduated and I became a teacher. And at this time I met my husband and I started, having my children.
How many children do you have?
I have three.
Three.
And things were good. I drank too much. I never did drugs though because I was scared to do drugs. Drugs were bad.
You did look for little escapes from the
and I
pain.
thought, because my mother was such a severe alcoholic, I thought, as long as you're not drinking perfume and passed out every day,
It's not a problem.
you're fine. And so my view of addiction was very skewed.
Yeah.
But I started having my family and things were going good. And in 1996, we decided to move back to the Dallas area. And I got a job as a special education coordinator in a small town outside of Commerce. And I was really proud of that job and things were going well. And my kids started going to school with me. But in 1998, my sister, who was my rock and anchor, was diagnosed with cancer. And it wasn't long after that we knew it was terminal. So. And my sister died here's the ironic thing about my story is my mother died at the age of 49 on Memorial Day 1979, and my sister died at the age of 49 on Memorial Day 1999.
Wow.
And I fell apart. And
How old were you at the time?
I was 39 when Kathy died.
39.
Yeah. And I just fell apart, and I had spent my whole life stuffing down this pain.
Yeah,
not
reaching 39, having avoided the ghosts of the past.
Right. And I
just a long time to.
It was, and I had a lot, and I just couldn't cope, and I started doing drugs, and I started doing methamphetamine, and it started out with diet pills, and it just took over my life real fast. In 2000, I was asked to leave the district where I had just been one of their best employees before, and I was hired in Garland ISD in a life skills class, but I was using every day.
Yeah.
And on April 19th, 2001, my husband was arrested at our home in Rockwall for manufacturing meth. And the way I found out about that, I was at school and I called. We were down to one go phone or prepaid cell phone, and everything was just falling apart. And a Rockwall County Sheriff's deputy answered our phone and said my husband had been arrested and they were looking for me.
So you were on the run then?
Yeah, I was like, I hung up and I told my assistant I needed to leave, and I walked out of that school and I've never taught a day since. But I found out CPS had gotten my kids, and I just was on the run. I was scared. I was scared about the only living family member I had was my father, and I was scared to call him. And so I just went driving and would get motel rooms and calling sick to work. And finally, like 4 days later, I thought, I remember I was in a motel off of 635, sitting on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands, thinking I just needed to kill myself because I couldn't see a way out. And it was the most hopeless I've ever felt. Because I couldn't, my kids were gone, my husband was locked up, I couldn't talk to him.
Your world was just crumbling around you.
Everything, it just had imploded.
Yeah.
And, but for some reason, and I called the benefits office of Garland ISD, and God placed an angel on the other end of that line because she just gave me hope. She didn't judge me. And she told me that, she goes, I don't know you, but you're a good person. You just have a problem. You just need to get some help. And in that moment, my life was I had hope again.
You had
And
hope.
she told me to go to it was Baylor Richardson at the time, and check in.
That's so important and interesting, I think, to see that you were suicidal, and it was someone believing in you and being positive,
Right.
and giving you hope that kept you going.
Right. And it was an act of kindness it was words.
She probably didn't even
She doesn't-
realize what
right.
she had done for you with that
Right.
in those few moments on the phone with you.
And I have looked for her
Yeah.
because I know she doesn't know the impact she had on my life that day. I know that. And she changed a potentially tragic situation. And so I left and I went to Baylor Richardson, and I ended up being charged and indicted, and I was sent to a rehab in Overton, Texas, because I had never been in trouble before. Not that I couldn't have been. I mean, I was lucky.
Yeah, you just
so
haven't
I'm not
been caught.
saying
It's
that,
the first time caught, right?
Yeah, first time caught.
Yeah.
But when I got out of rehab, I went to live with my dad. And this was not a good choice, because by this time he had found out, but he was still an active alcoholic. And he lived in a very nice home in Rockwall, but he would get drunk, and he would have glasses of vodka, and he would throw it in my face and tell me he wished I would have died.
Oh, wow.
And that hurt so bad, because all I ever wanted was to please this man. And I also found out at this time I lost my teaching certificate, and hopelessness set in again.
Yeah.
Not hopelessness to the point of suicide, but I relapsed. And within 1 month, I got a new charge, which revoked my probation, and I was sent to prison. And I got a 2-year sentence in prison, and I got locked up in Rockwall County, and then I left what they call pull chain to prison for in November. And I was really
you
scared.
did some pretty interesting jobs on the chain, so to speak, didn't you?
Yes. So when I first got to prison, I got to work in the library, because I did they do all this testing.
Yeah, you were probably above average intellectually in most of the other prison.
And so I got to work in the library. There were some humorous moments in prison too. I had one day I was walking, and you're referred to in prison as I was offender 1130254. That was my number. I'll never forget it. I know my social security number and my driver's license number. And you're not referred to as Washington or Susan, but one day I'm walking, and I hear these girls going, Mrs. Washington, Mrs. Washington. And it didn't even click at first, that's me, but then I stop, and I'm like, I'm Miss Washington.
That's my name.
And I was like, but when was I Miss Washington? And I was like, oh my God, I was Miss Washington when I taught school. And I turned, and it was my former students.
Oh my goodness.
And they ran over, which they weren't supposed to do. And they were like, Miss Washington, we're so surprised to see you here. And I was like, and so it was funny. And I laughed. I was like, and I really wasn't that surprised to see them. Yes. And I knew I was laughing. Yeah, I would. I thought.
Seeing them there was not a shock to you.
But I told them, I go, y'all have got to behave a lot better in prison than y'all did in school. And so then, not long after that, I left, and I got moved to a trustee camp. And all I really wanted was to keep my library job.
Yeah.
But when I moved to the trustee camp, I had to work on a pig farm, and I had to slop pigs. I had to wear a rubber suit.
Yeah.
I had to go herd the pigs into this pen, clean the slabs, and do the food. And it was the most humiliating job.
And it was just day in and day out.
Yeah, and every time you left the unit,
you were actually raising the pigs to then use in the prison.
Right, because prison it's self-supportive.
Yeah, I don't think people realize just what prison life is like or how it's.
Yeah, because we would raise them and slaughter them, and we had a lot of pork in prison. The hoe squad would harvest the cabbage we eat a lot of cabbage.
You were saying that. You ate a lot of cabbage.
Yeah. And but another thing that was hard is my first dorm I lived in, I was with murderers, and I was with a girl who microwaved her baby, and I was with a lady that decapitated her parents. I was with a teacher from Richardson who had killed her kids, and I was like, oh my God, I ran to the guard, and I was like,
why am I locked up with these people?
I go, I'm a very nonviolent drug offender, but it didn't matter. But anyhow, I paroled out of prison, determined to stay clean, because I didn't want to do that.
Now, I know you told me, or I read the story that you wrote, which I'm sure about, that one night you woke up in prison around with these people around you.
Right. I was just like, sometimes you wake up and you're kind of confused about where you're at. And I would
a little
wake
disoriented.
Up, and I'd sit up and look, and I'd be like, how on earth did I end up here? Where did it go so terribly wrong? I mean, just a year before I was teaching school.
Right. So
and now I'm in prison with murderers.
Right.
And it was just, and that was never answered, but it was answered for me later. And but I got out of prison and I came to Wiley, Texas to live. My husband had been out doing well, and our family was reunited. So I was really standoffish, though. I didn't want to connect with I didn't need to connect with my drug friends. But I had a lot of friends that, I was just embarrassed about what my life had become. And so I was still just living in shame. But my daughter Alexis met a girl at a volleyball camp named Beth, and they became really good friends, and they had a younger boy that was my son's age, and they ended up being on the same football team. And this was a neat family, and they started taking my kids to church. I had never grown up going to church. And I loved these friendships because I thought they were great for my kids, but I was really nervous about them knowing about me because I thought they knew I was an ex-con, felon, recovering drug addict. They're gonna reject me and my kids. Yeah. And but the Christmas of 2004, this family went snow skiing for the first time, and their son, who was 12 years old, skied into a tree and died instantly. Oh, wow. And I was overcome with, I was overcome for them, and I just thought they're going to fall apart. They're going to become alcoholics just because of what had happened when my brother died. I thought that's what's going to happen with them, and that didn't happen. And they were empowered with strength, hope, and courage, and I didn't know where that came from, but I knew I needed it in my life, and it just planted a seed.
So you found some direction through the example and the inspiration of someone else who had a tragedy that got through it. Yes. And that's what helped you.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long, and my husband and my children started going to church. I was working at a Dickey's barbecue as a cashier, and I was very proud of that job. I really was. Because, once you're a felon, it's hard to find a place to live, and it's hard to get a job. But I worked when church was going on. This church it was New Hope Christian Church in Wiley, and I couldn't go. But my daughter, who was a sophomore at the time, got caught with drugs at school, Haley, and I was so nervous about the cycle of addiction that I called the pastor of this church, and I said, "You've got to help me fix my kids." And when I got there, he was like, "We need to take a look at you." And so I was like, he was very insightful and a very wise man, and I started attending a small group within our church. And one night I was just broken. Dan, who had lost his son, which, I thought that's got to be the hardest loss. I had experienced a lot of loss, but the loss of a child, I just thought, and he was feeling guilt about not spending more time. And when he started sharing that picture of my mother when I told her I wish she was dead, came into my mind, and I was broken. And it was as if God reached through the heavens and broke my heart. And everything came out. It was just like I started sharing everything I've just shared with you.
All the things you'd been hiding.
Right.
Like your
our
dark
secrets
secret.
are
exactly.
so destructive.
Yeah.
And I
we feel like we
ground.
shouldn't reveal them because we might be rejected or worse.
And it's such a lie.
Yeah, and, that's important.
I fell on the ground, and so then, I kind of, it was just such an emotional experience. I kind of wasn't even aware of what was going on around me. But I kind of came to, and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I've just told all these people. and I got up, and they were around me, and I was scared they might have stones, but they didn't. And they just surrounded me with love. And some of them are my best friends today. And after that, when the truth will set you free. And I started walking in freedom. Yeah. And things started. I was at the drive-thru in Dickey's, and a girl who works for Highland Homes drove through, and she goes, "I want to hire you to work for me." And I go, "I need to tell you about it." She goes, "I don't need to know anything about you. You are funny. You're friendly." I go, "Wait a minute. You need to know a lot about me," because I wasn't going to hide.
Because you had learned at that point, people trust you more when you're honest, even when you have dark secrets to share.
It's hard,
because we all have them, really.
We do. We all have those secrets in our closet. But I told her, and she still hired me, and I'm still working for them today. And in 2008, I started leading a group at the church. In 2008, I got my teaching certificate back.
Oh, you
So
did.
I'm a valid teacher.
Wow. That's-
now, I don't know if anyone
That's
will-
redemption right
That
there.
is
Yeah.
redemption. And I don't know
Yeah.
if anyone will hire me because a lot of districts have policies
Yeah,
that they're not going to
that's
hire
true.
felons.
But just to have that, and know that you've been reinstated.
But if God wants me
Yeah.
to teach, I know I'll teach.
Yeah.
And so things were just, I started sharing my story and serving in a prison ministry,
Yeah.
and things were just unfolding, and I was really excited. And then I had this dream to write a book, and the name of my book is From Pom-Poms to Prison.
Yeah, I love that title. Love it.
And I started, getting hired to speak, and things were just really unfolding for me. And I rolled out a website last year on my birthday, last December, and it's called Pom-Poms to Prison.
It's a blog. You share your path, and I follow it regularly, as you probably know. And it's amazing to see the wisdom that you have to share.
Because I don't feel very wise.
You are. You really are. In fact, I follow you there, and I follow you on Facebook. Okay. And I see the impact that you're having because of the comments that people leave.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so important about the example that you set and the principle that we all need to understand. And that is that our dark skeletons actually can put us in a place, or our adversities put us in a place where we make a much bigger difference in the world.
Right.
And I can see that you're doing that.
Right.
But you've had something happen to you recently that has really brought your inspiration to others at a level that it's hard to comprehend. Just what you've, it seems like you've gone through enough already in your life.
I thought, Memorial Day is a tough day for me. Yeah. And this past Memorial Day, my kids and my grandbaby, my daughter Alexis had a baby as a teenager. But they came and we spent the day at the pool, and it was just a beautiful day. And I got past Memorial Day because it's just it's an irrational fear.
Anniversaries.
Yes. And I got through it. And then on June 7th, I was driving to work, and I got a phone call, and it was a wily. I'm gonna have a hard time with this.
No.
A wily police officer called, and he just told me my daughter Alexis had been in a car accident, and I go, well, how is she okay? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, I came upon the scene after she'd been transported. He goes, all I know is it was a really bad wreck. And so I was driving to work at the time, so I just started calling people, and I worked by myself that day, so I was just taking care of business. And then I thought, I'm going to call him back and see how she was transported. Because if it was care flight, it was really bad, but if it was ambulance, maybe. And so he goes, oh, it was by ambulance. So I thought she was okay, and I went to, I had to go to Medical City, or Plano Medical, on Coit and 15th. And when I walked into the emergency room, I said, I need to see my daughter. And they said, you need to go back there. And when I went back there, I kind of started running around because I was just, I needed to see her. And they were like, you need to stop. And they go, you need to go in this room. And that scared me. Yeah. And then they
make you go sit and wait in a room.
Right. And then they came in and they said that she had died.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. They said, someone said I screamed. I don't remember screaming. But I didn't call him when my son was already on the way. He's 19. He was already on the way to the hospital, and my husband, I'd gotten a hold of him, but within moments, my church family was there, and to surround me and support me, which was something I didn't have. And what I've learned through this, when my sister died, I walked in bitterness and self-pity, and I turned to numb my pain. And we have a choice. Yes. And I have chosen to walk in love and compassion. And
it's such a overwhelming story, I find, because it was through these deaths that you went to a place that had you on drugs and methane. Most people don't get off of that. Right. And after being in prison, and then to have a devastating loss of your own child being killed, and to see how you've handled it is amazing. you know, and I know that it's hard to find purpose in tragedy like that. And
well, I have a hope today.
You
know, because I know I'll see her again.
Yes.
And on July 15th, I celebrated 10 years clean off meth, alcohol, and eating. I have not even taken a pain. You know, I had an abscess tooth.
If there's anything that would make you want to go back, it would be the death of your own child.
I just, you know, it's hard. And but I'm letting myself feel the pain where I've never done that before. And
so allowing that pain to come through you and to talk
and just
about
cry when I need to cry.
And you know, you tell your story. You tell it frequently, and that's another thing that I feel is so important in healing, is to tell our stories. And the more that we tell it, the more we learn from it, the more others can be uplifted. And I think it's really an evidence that when we hold it in, it destroys us. When you couldn't speak of your brother, it led you to, by 39 years old, you know, going down a path that is usually you don't come back from. But to have an even worse thing, I think I lost a daughter too. My daughter died 7 months old of SIDS. And so I know a little bit. Mine was, shocking too. And I know for me, telling my story, it's why I do what I do today. And you sharing your story as you do in so many ways. I know you're always talking about the new things that you've learned on your blog. And I really hope, can you give people the address for your blog so they can come and follow you?
It's www.pomponsto prison. Ponds. That's the correct way to do it.
That's good to know. Ponds to prison.
Now, and if you Google my name, it'll come up.
It'll come up.
Used to, you know, it was, when you Googled Susan DeFace Washington, it came up, teacher indicted on drug charges. And then that kind of died down. And then when you Googled it, there was some girl named Susan defacing signs in Washington.
Oh.
And so, and
now, because your name was defaced before you got married.
And that's a very uncommon name. So I could not hide from this anymore. But one more thing I just wanted to share about when I would wake up in that prison, I wondered how on earth I got there. That was never answered to me. But I was working at Dickey's, and by this time I was running the store, and we had messed up an order. We had gave the guy the wrong meat, and he had called, and so I was going to take him the correct order, and he asked me how much a turkey sandwich was, and I said it's $4.60. And when I hung up, I thought I'm going to give him that turkey sandwich. We messed up his order, and so I got the stuff and I drove to his house. And when I got there, it was very chaotic. He was holding a baby. He was trying to, keep a dog from going out. And I handed him his food, and he handed me this $5 bill and shut the door. And I was like, but what? And I was like, this should be my tip. And I started walking to the car, and I started getting real self-righteous. Like, I drive my car. I was trying to justify.
Kind of rationalizing.
And this battle started on in my mind. That, and it's a corny analogy, but it was like the devil was on one shoulder and the angel on the other. And I was like, you deserve that money. You spent your gas. You make minimum wage here. You deserve that. And the angel was like, that's not, he didn't intend to tip you. You need to take that back. If he wants to tip you, he'll tip you. Or you need to call your boss and see what to do with this money, or you just need to pay for the sandwich. And so this battle, I was driving back to the store, and I just didn't want to think about it anymore. And so I folded that $5 bill up, and I put it in my pocket, and I went in, and it was really slow. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was $5. I was just, and I went to the to-go section, and it was just like God spoke to me. And he goes, do you remember when you would ask how on earth I got here? He goes, it was in seemingly innocent situations like this where you compromising your morals and values. He goes, because if you keep that money, you're still in it. It's not your money. It's not real black and white. But next time your conscience isn't even going to ding. And he took me back. It took me back to how I started out to be a girl who would not do drugs. And how I did a little bit. I justified it. Speed. I cleaned something for a little while. There were things where I started justifying it and okaying it, and I moved those boundaries and those morals and values that I had in place until I was a completely different person. And it was such a slow thing.
Right, little decisions like that that you wouldn't think make a difference. And that's what brought you to to sleeping alongside of murderers.
Right, right. It didn't happen
Yeah,
overnight.
yeah.
It was just there's that song, it's called A Slow Fade, and things just happen. People's lives do not crumble in a day.
Yeah.
And you just start, and I ran to the cash register, and I rang that sandwich up, and I didn't even take the change. And, now I know if I start justifying or getting that sale, like, I deserve this, I really start thinking about and seek God, because that's important. And
Yeah, that's such a great lesson, because I think sometimes we don't stop and realize how little decisions really can impact us in big ways.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming
well,
today
thank
and sharing
you.
your story. And you are working on a book that will
Yes.
hopefully be published very soon, and it's called
From Pom-Poms to Prison.
From Pom Pom. Now this one's P-O-M-P-O-M.
No, P-O-M. Because I
Pom-Poms
did
to
it the
Prison.
other way,
Okay.
but someone said, no, that's the
Make
correct
it.
word is
Okay,
Pom-Poms.
that's good to
And
know. So
I know
people
it's
can
hard.
watch
I'm
for
like,
that.
are you
but-
sure? And she goes, yes, you need to do that, what she said. And I got a literary agent who I'm going to be turning the book proposal in next week. So
Great.
I'm very
it's
excited.
Great timing. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
And
you for having
I
me.
know that you are an incredible inspiration to me, and hopefully now to many others, and will continue to be as you continue to share your story.
Okay, thank you.